Okay, we're actually following along again, but what we have done so far, we were able to use most of the simpler models that has already a location with it. So, oopsie, why am I refreshing? Well, anyhow, it turns out my clicker can refresh my homepage. Like today, we probably later on. I'll give a brief introduction to Trackit. It's something very useful if you have recover tags or like even wildlife pet tags with the transmitted data. Yesterday morning we were doing the geolocation first run from the wildlife software. Essentially, you can recreate the process with Trackit, but using a statistical model. What wildlife computers, what they did in their software is apply a threshold method to pick the times. I think they used to do more like a threshold method. Right now, they're kind of doing something similar to what we do in the statistical model, but with just the algorithm approach, just certain rules. I don't know how they exactly code it up. They never really say what they're in there now, but there used to be a threshold method. So threshold method meaning when light reach a certain level, you take the timestamp as the sunrise and sunset, and that's how you get the noon and the day length. So there are actually other packages in OWL that can allow you to do that method, and recently I've been playing with some of those. Mainly because, like for microwave tags or some of the other stuff, if you can decide your own way of cutting the stuff out, you actually have a lot more handling. And some of the recent things I found is if I can do some smoothing on my incoming data, like if my income light data, I can do some pre-processing, clean it up a little bit. My light positions are much better, so I actually can use the same threshold method, but I almost never got any points going too crazy. But that's just something new. I haven't really written anything about on it. It's kind of going back to the basics. Is if you can have a better handle of your light data, things will look a lot nicer. So I think one of my message for that part of new work is perhaps the manufacturers can do some pre-smoothing or better handling on the tags, but then they're doing what they have been doing so far with the light-based methods, and probably you have a lot better positions to start with. But that part needs written out or exploring more. But we won't go through those because you'll get lost very easily. But for Trackit, it's alongside with, it's almost building on all these other models that we have been playing with, but just the starting point is different. We're using the light data instead of positions. So we'll go through some examples today on Trackit, but I think I can show just a few slides on what that's about. Yeah, so that's what we have been doing. It's a two-step process. You have to start out from some manufacturer software, get the first cut of the positions. When you have like really noisy positions, you use KX track or things we have been working so far to get a handle on it. And of course, there are all the other methods that I alluded to at first when we do the first presentation. But essentially, that's what we have been doing. It's a two-step. You have to rely on someone to give you a first cut. What I was mentioning earlier, I've been going back and say if I don't have the perfect information, whether I can get a better first cut. And it actually matters a lot. If you can do a better first cut, when you pass it through these models, it will work out really beautifully. And just a big quick recap is you have these raw positions and you've been using KF track, or when you have SST, it would be UKF SST. But Trackit just work directly with the data collected by the tag. So that's why I said it's what first work best for archival tags, because archival tags is already collecting all these data. But you have the same with recovered tags. Recovered pet tags will give you the same set of data, but you actually can work for just that small chunk of light data transmitted by pet tags from wildlife computers. So essentially, a part of these curves can be used to run Trackit, but you still need the light data. If you don't have light data coming out from your tag, then you're done. You have to rely on the previous methods. So the starting point is light, and that's basically the main part. And yeah, so these things you already know. So it's still, everything is still in the same framework. So you have an underlying movement model. You use your observations. So the observations now becomes light and SST instead of positions and SST. You use the common filter, and then it's running by, you estimate things by with maximum log likelihood, and it gives you the most probable track. So everything remains the same so far, essentially, from your previous experience dealing with KF track, UKF SST. All those can be used along this whole suite of tools. Yeah, so the movement models is the same movement model. We won't need to go through it. The times now can be the only difference here, like even the notation is the same. The only difference here is now the times can be twice a day. Sunrise, sunset, each of them will be able to give you a position. So that's what the only difference here. The model actually predicts what it sees in light. So previously we have been predicting using the movement model to say where it would be with as a position. But now, since we're working with light, so what that does is like we'll predict at each of the next time point what would be the light observed at that position. So you're simulating what you see, and the tag provide you with what it records. Again, the same like positions, but right now we're just doing light instead. And these are just like things that relate to how you calculate it. It's all in the paper, so it's just I'm just trying to use a graphic to show how this works. So you have sunrise, sunset. At each time point we predict the light, and our observations comes with a tag which gives you those light readings. It has a correlation structure built into the whole model. The reason being, it's really basic assumptions. So if I look at the light right now, my next measurement, if it's within the same period, it should be related. So the correlation structure handles that. And also, when they're taking a file, we have to reduce the amount of relatedness. So the correlation structure in the model handles that, and there are 3 parameters in it. So will be row 1, 2, 3, and these. So that's the equation. I won't go through the equations because I can't remember each of them on top of my head too. But we do refer to the paper if you want to know how each of the parameters are really spelled out. But essentially, it captures the idea of what I told you. Like anything measured close in time will be related, and it's just a matter of fudging a bit on how the shape of these curves looks like, essentially.
Do we need to modify the correlation depending on?
No, it will be estimated. So these things will be estimated.
Already by the program, not
yeah, exactly. So no touches. It's more like
which type of correlation structure is best. And already all
so it's more it's all those are estimated, just like BX, BY. So those are built in to be estimated. And the only reason you know that you might actually need to change some of the things is for these things you can turn it off if you don't want to estimate it. So it's again, it's like your be wise sometimes if you don't want to estimate it to keep the model simpler. You take out the correlation structure. So maybe it's really, I don't need to be so complex. I don't need to account for the reality as much if my model doesn't work. So that on the practical side, that's the reason. And so this is just with the raw geolocations, these are the points, and you basically can calculate just from light directly a fitted track, but you're just comparing between the points, and usually you see quite a bit of improvement in latitude. So that's basically what this graphic kind of trying to show. And then, so it started out with just using light only, then we extended a bit. So this is again how your measurements are made. So this is in time, and you have your sunrise, sunset, but in between, we just now add a time point so you can have SST. So when that happens, you basically have three measurements. So you have 2 light measurement and 1 temperature measurement. So at this point, you're adding SST to help you correct for the model as well, not just using light. The model does get a lot more complex when you start using SST. So again, you build your model from the 2 stage. First started with light, and then if light works, then you start adding SST to it. It's almost like what you did with KF track and UKF SST. So what we've been doing is get you into that mindset, and that's the major difference here. And you can see there's some familiar friends here. You have bias, an error, and then a radius. So essentially it's another extension of the UKFST model. You just will almost plug it right in and get it to work like that. We never get around to add salinity and other things to it yet, but essentially you can do that even with the setup right now. And even with UKF SST, even by default, we're using SST, but I've done many different silly hacks to it. So you can easily plug in a World Ocean Agnes database file for salinity or whatever, as long as your tag measure the same thing. So what we have been measuring, say, what we're using SST is 1 layer. You can totally substitute the other layer in, and the model will still work. You just need to know what to match it against. So yes?
Can you get pat tags that do salinity?
There's some variations that they have done, but not in the mass market. I've seen, at least they mention that all you do the dry. I think somehow they were able to get salinity from the wet-dry switch as well. I remember seeing.
Yeah, I guess the time it takes.
Yeah. So there are variations, but not in the popular setup. But what I'm saying is, if you want to do something different, you can totally swap out the SST stuff and supply your own file. So you just have to, in a way, fake it into the same setup. So what I've done for at least for Trackit, I didn't use sea surface temperature because I think I was working with a basking shark and it was diving so much, so I was using temperature at 400 meters instead of the surface. So things like that. So you can easily change that layer as long as you have measurements. And if you have a recover tag, that makes life easy because you can take average temperature at 400 meters from the tag, and then you have that layers of temperature at 400 meters from either World Ocean Agnes. You can even just use as cross as that, or if you get fancy, you go and use an AP model for output per se. And that's how these things can be do even in the framework right now. Our idea was more apart from SST, you have to have another measurement in the model. So then we're using 2 more information source. So I alluded to this thing a bit earlier about the resolution of imagery. So the analogy again is back to KF track and UKFST. What if so light only options, almost like a KF track. So keep it simple. You only need light. Then you start adding satellite imagery, and you can use all sorts of different imagery in it. The default options that you have been using is called the red nose is an archival interpolated one. It's a 1 degree weekly resolution, but then you can stepping it up to use other stuff, which is high in resolution. And the more things you try with high resolution, the more time you use. So that's why that get blended SST function is actually here. So you can see it's at a 0.1 degree and 5-day interval. And if you go to MODIS, which is the most popular sea surface temperature right now, will be 0.05 degree. And there are plenty of SST options. So the GRIS imagery, which is the global efforts on having a unified SST products. There's a big group, almost like each of the regional oceanographic centers, they will contribute to the GRIS effort. GRIS is GHRSST, so GRIS imagery. But they will be on the scale on this or finer. So this is about 4 kilometers. They're 1 kilometer's products, but who knows how long it will need to run if you're giving that high resolution of imagery. And go away. So that's the example data set it's actually used in the paper to show, okay, so given these scenarios, how do they change things around? So the same tips that you'll be working with KF track or UKF is like they actually share the same tips. Like when you do SST, it works best when you have a sharp gradient. They can help, but maybe not all the time. And overall, it does reduce the width of the common region when you start putting SST in. And we have been doing a lot of exercises on your own data as well. We look for convergence, and when convergence doesn't work, you can start like messing around with different initial values or parameters. So they actually, by and large, they share lots of same setup as you have been doing. So it shouldn't be too different, except they now mean a little bit different, and we're dealing with light. And you won't have some of the things that you have been using a lot, like bias in longitude and latitude. We don't have longitude and latitude to start with, so that's nothing to turn on or off. So what you have been turning on and off would be the light proportion, and it gets a bit more abstract at that point. Okay. Don't worry about this one. So it was about wine. Yes. Here, so the way to read these things. So there are 4 scenarios. So this is light only. So you go from low to higher resolution. So low, and then higher, and then the highest. And on the right-hand side, you have the same suspect. You have your longitude and latitude plots and SST. So the crosses here is the raw information. Let's see. This is a main coast shark, and the colors are basically how the fit of each one goes. And there's a spot tag on these things. So the yellow line here is the spot tag. So we might want to turn off the light for a while to see if that but you can always go back to the paper and stuff. It's like the same graphics. It's just a bit complicated. Yeah. So let's see. On the map here, the spot tag is in the cross. So that would be your way of saying is the somewhat true positions. At least for the pad tag arena, we want to get as close as like a spot tag would perform, but I don't think we can get much better than a spot tag, but essentially that's what we're aiming for. So you can see the yellow line is the spot tag, and there's
That's
area.
quite
Yeah, there's an area that really failed, and I don't remember. It's October. October is when. October is when it's really coastal. So like that. That's just something inherent with the lights. It's like when it gets coastal, the water color will change, and it's only as good as the light sensor gets. And if we have bad lighting, it's almost as hard as any other to get the latitude right. Longitude, they really follow different solutions, different SST imagery follows the longitude pretty well in general. And but what I want to show in particular for this one is like it started with the light blue line, which is light. So using light only, you have you're really far off from. For this problematic part, it's really far off from the spot tag, but once you start adding some SST to it, no matter what resolution you add, it at least pulls it a bit away from how wrong it is. So at least it helps, but it might not correct it completely, but that's what SST can do. That's the main message here. So with all these different colors, SST solution, except like you still have some problems when it's really coastal, but by and large it does help a little bit. And you can see why it fails too for the SST. So you do have when you have good gradients, it at least will match up the spot tag better. But you see this period, like the SST really don't change too much too. So it tried to do its best, but when you do have too much gradient, it doesn't really help too much either. So that's something that you always can think about when you have an SST plot. It's like, okay, is the information helpful? Is all homogeneous? And it's not helpful. Or which part was not helpful? It should be reflected in either confidence regions around. So your dotted lines, it should maybe if it's not really helpful, it should broaden up, or if it's helpful, then it should narrow it down. And the last part I want to show from here is, yeah, I think I'm pretty good at this one. I'll just show you a few more examples.
Is there any kind of model that you can use those spot positions to sort of drag or say, you know, the pat tag would have been there at this time, so
to drag it to.
So yeah, and then try and correct from those positions to get a more accurate.
If you were yesterday here instead of swimming in the ocean, yes.
Yeah, but that would be like for the purpose of this, at least at this exercise, is more okay. So how well does the method work? So we were not trying to get the best track. So the two things to remember is like how well the model works, or how you get the best track out.
Yeah.
So yes, that would be the way to do it. But your objective becomes I just want to get the best track. I don't really have to worry too much how theoretically how strong. Like you kind of trade off at that point. So okay, you're using other information than relying just on the model. So that's the two things.
I'll tell you now.
Yeah.
One question: is it possible to split the track in moments where we have a much higher error and basically decide on what kind of resolution you have in different part of the track in terms of SST? For example, using the highest level from this point to this point.
Yes. Yeah, that's totally a legitimate idea. You just have to be able to prepare your data. Like it's like yes. Once you're able to prepare your data files into certain ways, then it should be no problem. It will the model will just suck in what you tells it to do. So
you can tell him apply this model from row 1 to 10. This SST data.
Yeah. Essentially, you're messing with the input file. So you can supply a stack of files for them, right? So you can cheat and give it a bunch of better SST here, and then a bunch. Like the only complication is like your radius will be it won't adapt the radius, so you cannot. But it's like you're still looking at the area, but then you have a lot of pixels, more pixels. So Yeah, like theoretically, I don't think it's any problem because you're still looking in the same area, but you just somehow just have lots of more pixels.
Just by indexing, you said from 1 to 10 use this data to match this,
Yeah.
from this point to this point use this other source of data
Yeah,
much more.
almost like, and you don't even have to go through that route. You just have to modify your list of files. So you just have to, you know, which period that you want to use that set of files, and in that same directory, you just have to have a continuous file stack that can be good imagery here and bad, like left. You see what I'm saying?
Understand.
Yeah, so you don't even need to do the indexing.
index,
You
you
just tell it what to use, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are lots of hacks. So I would say there's hacks that are not built in, but I don't think there's anywhere to stop you from doing that. And I like doing hacks myself too. So I still remember I need to tell you one thing here, but I just escaped my mind. Let's see. So, oh, okay. Yeah. The other message I want to tell you is why do we bother to go through all these different models? Is or running just so many scenarios is if you really want to know how well the model behaves, or you have the time to do that, is you want different models to say the same thing. So different models as in scenarios. Like you're still using Trackit, but you're giving it 4 different imagery resolution to it. And if they all tell you about the same thing, then you should be more confident. And but like look at here, like you don't really have a spot track usually. So that's the trade-off. Like if you have the spot track, then you don't even need to run all these things. But here, like we'll focus in the latitude again. Actually, in this scenario, the blue line, which is the light-only scenario, works actually better than any of the SST solutions. But assuming you don't have the yellow line, how will you be able to tell? If you only when you can see all 3 different SST solutions, you see they have a progression of getting the higher resolution you go. So Reynolds is the lowest in purple, and then the red one is a bit higher, and then post-wash is the highest. And see, you can see how it's starting drifting in certain direction. The higher resolution you go, then it seems to something's maybe funny there, and it's only using this type of telltale sign you'll be able to pick. And even though they're actually matching pretty well, but I think this bias comes from maybe the smoothing radius. It just with the higher resolution, somehow it just got thrown off even more. So that's why as we said, we've been using Reynolds because it's kind of good trade-off. You don't supply too much information, and there are times that if you see such a systematic shift, like say if you're the highest you go and somehow it just throw you in a certain direction, then there's something, there might be something funny there. And again, the reason being why you have such a problem here is when you don't have any SST signature. So that's why you're always bouncing between these plots and look for these lines. So okay, so I'm telling myself, this is strange because it's going in certain direction, and why does SST do not behave all in the same way? Like I would be expecting, like any other case, they will be tracking each other pretty well if it's really working. So when you see such a deviation, then you should look at what your SST data looks like, and you see there's really no gradient for that period of time. So that might be why it's really not performing.
But which one you prefer?
I'll keep it simple. At that point, I wouldn't go for the highest resolution because it's just, at this point, I don't know so it's almost like sometimes you provide too much information, you get noise and distracted. It's like, well,
but it could be better.
Yes, but only when I say, okay, so that's why you go back and look at the SST. Like, if you give really good SST, does it matter? If it's really not changing too much, then you see what I'm saying? It's like that. So that's why having different SST scenarios allows to look at how the model performs too. But it depends on time. Sometimes if you don't have the time, then yes.
Find another job because.
Yeah, exactly. Like the business kind of like only when you have like you don't sleep over weekends and stuff, you get to do that. But yeah, so there's always the trade-off. But you just have to be conscious, at least like the ideas you get from running these exercises. If you use SST, look for periods if it's not changing too much. Like by gradient, it's just through the time series. Like you have gradient through this time series. So you have some gradient to work with. And this basically doesn't have gradient, it's just stagnant. So that really makes any estimation challenging. And it's good to have landmass for some applications. You can see, okay, the light only seems to be working somewhat well, but then the more you try, the better stuff you do. You have that northward bounce here, but so that's the trade-off. So this one with the SST added, you actually pretty much can put it off land pretty handily compared to the light only. But the higher resolution somehow there's something funny and put it on land with these things. So landmass is a mixed blessing. At least it allows us to know how the model is performing, but at the same time you have to do that one step of parametric correction afterwards. So there's not something built in. But I sort of like this trade-off, even though it's kind of not standard to a lot of the newer methods now. The newer methods put the bathymetry in it already, so everything will be masked. So you won't be able to see all these differences if you just throw in bathymetry, because it's likely to put everything on the water already. So for me, I cannot tell whether the model is working or it's just bathymetry. So that's the reason. But on the plus side, because it's handled all within one statistical model, those things are described more coherently. Like right now, we're doing an extra step. They're not as coherent as a single model would be. But when you have a single model, then you don't know who's influencing what. So this is just another one. It gives you the same message essentially. So the spot tag here, I think stop here, so you can't really tell from here. But yeah, so these are the graphs in the paper already. So if you go back and you want to like tear it apart, just think about those things I mentioned. It's the gradient, how different scenarios work out. And it works best when it's on a drifter for sure. So not on fish, we like it. Like the methods are really designed to handle that well. And we'll run the drifter example afterwards, so you can get to play. And you can see right near the equinox period, everyone will suffer. Like even with our method, because it's light based. So you only get so much resolution from light, and during the equinox, we have the worst fit. But with SST, somehow it really pulls it back to what it's supposed to be. So again, it's almost like back to the basics. You are aware of the issues with the data that you're trying to do. Like if it's light data, it will be suffering during equinoxes. No matter what models you use, that it will show up.
The error around the equinoxes is like a
it's
bell-shaped curve, or is just
it's shoot off to space. It's almost like at the day of equinox, there's no way to tell. So it's a runaway.
But how far on the sides? I mean, how many
days
before?
How many days out?
We have to be aware.
I would say like around the equinox, maybe a week before and after, it will start getting crummy. And you can see in your data, if you just plot the raw positions, you see points that really go off everywhere. It's right around that period. So that's just it's the period around, not just like before after. So that's the way it goes. And yeah, that's it. Okay, so the basics. You already installed the packages, so you all have the packages in your computer. Like you just have to call it up, and so we're the progression. We're now here. We'll do Trackit, and again, if you need to know some of the parameters, it will be in this page. So much like what you have in KF Track. So these things are described here now, and it's just an expansion of what you get from the help file within the package, but that's it. We won't use what is here for now because we have actually something easy to work with, but it goes from the same setup and the light data. So the first thing about here, I shouldn't use my pointer. The first thing about here is like now the data comes more like an archival setup. You can see it's a depth, light, and temperature. So if you have ever done anything with archival tag, it comes in that setup. You have to set up your file in that way. Oh yeah, I think what's useful for me before we go into the code directly, I'll show you how to output some of those files from the wildlife software. Because that's really easy now. Because we finally convinced them to use our stuff a few years ago, and they claim it's one of the best things that they have done for themselves. Without acknowledging us that much. The good part is they give you a tool now to output the file when you need it easily. It used to be we have to just run another out script to read off the data, which now if you do have had 2 to 4 tags, which are in the Excel format, we do have it on, I think whether I keep on the website or not, but we do have methods to read the data we need from those tags off for Trackit. But those are historic data. I don't know if anyone still have those pack 2 to 4 data set now. They're nice actually. It will take in another data frame, which is basically SST data, but it will look exactly like what we've been doing so far. Instead of getting SST into the first file now, because they collected a slightly different time step. So this is a continuous stream because it's more like a archival tag, and this one is a daily SST. So now if you need to run SST with it, you have to supply 2 files. File 1 is your light data, file 2 is the SST data, and they're at a different time step. That's why I cannot merge 2 together easily. And it's simpler for you to prepare to. So that can come from what exercise we were trying to struggle yesterday. You basically already have this file, so it's just a matter whether you have the light data that you can work with. The workflow is similar. You call the library. You read in your file. We always just start running with light only. We don't worry about running light with SST to start with. So we don't read in the SST file in the first get-go. So you just read in the light data file, and then there's a step for preparing it. Trackit needs your start and end point more so than the geolocation, the KF track or your KFST. The reason being why, if it needs to know at least the start. You need to know the location that you're working with. You can I cannot just use light to know where you are. So that's just, you have to give it somehow to say, okay, am I looking at least which direction I'm starting the model? So you do need a start and end point. So that's the only differences from that we need. So not just for the light data, but we need your start and end point. So that's what you supply in the function. So the first function is just prepare the data files so that the program will understand it, but it will take in your start and end points. And you can sometimes we don't have the endpoints because we know we recover the tag. We don't exactly know where it pop off. In those situations, you have to kind of guesstimate. And the best guesstimate that I can come up with is, what if I run a KF track or run a UKST first? So I have my light data. I also have my lat long from manufacturer. So I can do all those things that you have been doing and use that last point. I can turn my model into fixed. In those models, I'll just let the last point not to be fixed and let the model estimate a last point for me. So I can take that last point and use it into this model, essentially. So that's just a more practical side. Is what I don't know what my last point is. You either give you guess what it is from your expert opinion, or you can run a KF track or UKFST, and there's an option. If you remember, you can turn fixed first equal to fixed last equal to false, then let the model just run through the course and give you a guesstimate of the last point, and you can use that last point here essentially. So that's just the way you need it. Like otherwise, the model won't be too heavy. And when we run the example, when we run the example, you see that much better. So that's the workflow. So one other function that is actually very useful the program has is a two-layer depth correction. So it applies, it's a depth compensated thing. So light data, as you know, as it goes deeper, it'll decay, and we want the light at the surface in order to do all those calculations for your position. So how do you correct light at depth? You can do a simple optical equation how you can do that yourself, or use just yes. it's just decay. It's the decay. You can just use that one, but you can go fancy. You can use more. You can correct for the scattering and all those in between. But yeah, if you don't do that, then that's just two-layer depth correction. It's a function that's already written. You can set. It's a two-layer ocean, so you assume a two-layer ocean. How deep is your two layers? So you just, I think the default, I forgot, is either 25 or 50 meters is the first layer. So you have the layer that have the most light, and then there's a dark layer. There's light and dark layer. So you can mess with how deep it goes, but what that does is essentially correct your depth. This depth compensates your light measurement. So what you see here before, these are just straight off the tag, so it's not surface measurement. So that's why we could use that here, because we can use that to correct for the light. So using that function, it will correct for the light data that is approximately at the surface. And that's the only reason you want. But then you're curious whether all the other tags, what you have been running so far, do they do it for their manufacturer locations? It would be yes and no. I know microwave do that compensated their light measurements on board. So that they already do it on board and do it. And I think even for wildlife, they should do that on board and transmit that part that's already compensated. So it's that compensated light. So it's all at the surface and transmit those to you. So as far as I understood, they do that for on board, and so you don't see that process. So
when you say on board, you mean the tag itself?
On the tag itself before it even send you the data.
Ah, okay.
So I think that's my understanding.
Yeah, it consumes much more battery.
Consume much more battery.
Not that much, I guess. But it won't allow you to perform your own corrections.
Yeah. Well, you can voice out those concerns to the pack manufacturer, like what's the best way to do it.
That's how they stay on business. So you always need that. You have that black box that you have no idea how they work.
Yeah, so the rest is just running the model, which we'll cover, but essentially they give you the workflow again. And right now, let me show you how you get some of the data off easily. It's like kind of knowing the data will be fun too, because it's a bit different from what you have to do. Okay, that's texting layout, I guess. Oh, okay. Okay, that's that. Look, just the pad tags. What if they just transmit the data to you from Argos? You just have you don't have the full series. So what it will look like, tag data. So like, we go back to like look for wildlife tags, everything is held in here. That's why they use the same file to run in the standalone version. Remember yesterday we just used like look, and you can run the standalone version in GPE. So that's basically has all the data you need to run anything. And what we do is we need this part. So if you go towards the end, you have here, like level 1 through wherever, is what you can use to run the model. So it's the chunk of the data points towards the end that allows it to do that. So if you open one of those files, you can open and look at what we're dealing with. So we're no longer trying to get positions from here, but we're actually using the light data at this part.
So you're just going to copy this to the file?
Oh no, we're not copying it in a new file. Like that would be too. Well, you can do it like we used to do. Essentially, what you need to do is to do some Excel magic. You have to copy each line, transpose it. You have to write the macro. So you copy that line, transpose it, add the datem. So they have to basically reshape. So or you can do it in R with R prior or something like that. But what it entails is you have to go across that line, transpose it, add back the datem, then do the next line, go through the rest of the file. So if you're good at macro processing, that's the way to go. But otherwise, we'll use the software. The starting point is actually the same. So you can start out from your DS file and then do, oh, how come I have so much stuff? Let me delete some of this. Okay, so you assume it, you start from the DS file. So back to square one essentially. You can open the DAT processor. And then you just drag the file in again. It has it. You can see it has actually the light curves dot and does, and that's what we want to get out. And then you do your usual light level estimator. Let it run through. It killed it. Let me cheat it. Well, it's late, but it's coming back up. So you can, when you was doing the same process like yesterday almost, you can let it finish or open up what you have saved from yesterday, and yes, and you can go back to your DF file menu here. You can see after common filter interface, actually the Trackit interface is really not interface. It's just a way to write out files we want. They tried to hook it up to R, but they only work for certain versions way back then, and they give up supporting the current versions of R anymore. The R is they're just constantly changing. I don't think they want to keep up with it anymore. But what you can do is you can generate the files that you need to run it. So you can do it without SST, and it will spit you out that one file that I need. And come on. Well, technical issue here.
Same problem with
Yeah,
me.
me too. Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
Oh, Zayn.
Yeah.
Good.
That should be happy.
I thought they're pretty solid. Let me see. Okay, I got my file too.
This procedure is not on the website, right?
It's on the website. It's also on the website. Yeah. So you probably have the same thing now. You have it. I saved the like log file somewhere, which is this guy. and it's formatted in the right way that we want it without having yourself run the macros. So you have this file, and since it also generates an out script for you, and the reason that I do like what they have is they can just populate some of the stuff for you, like the file name and stuff. That saves some time if you want to. You can use all these scripts to help you out essentially. Oh, I can paste. Here. And let's see. So it can. So it will help you read the table. So it takes care of some of the stuff. But beware. It will always put that 0 and 99 if you don't if you don't do that process in the GPE program to tell you where it is. So they somehow never do too good a job of putting those start and end points into your file. So if you just run it right away, you're likely to fail because there's that start and end point stuff that will be 0 and 99. So remember yesterday we spent some time in GPE trying to get that one. I'll go back here. So settings. So if this information is not it's not correct here, that file won't be correct as well. So if you just do it without looking, you likely will have a file with this problem. And when you don't have the right start and end point, so you usually have 0 and 99 in both places, which you don't want, because otherwise the model can't do anything essentially. But that's usually the case. If you use any one of those scripts from what they generate, make sure you have the right information on these two parts, because they can't look it up correctly usually. So that's the only thing you have to pay attention to. And so running the model will be similar. Well, we'll do it in a bit, but essentially they asked me for some of the best options that I can come with, but it depends how I feel that day. So these are that one day after drinking that I wrote them in a meeting, but that's been propagated since then. But essentially it's like what you feel like. But those are the options that they put it there. They put that hash sign so you can try. Like I never tell them really this one. This one is a really specific case that they give me a really crummy track to work with. There's like really data poor. I try a lot of different things before I come up with that option, but somehow it's the default. So I don't know why they picked it. So since you guys now know how to do your own stuff, and it's better to refer back to the websites for some idea what you want to try or not do. But that's one option. Then this chunk of the code is just there trying to just output some of the files for you. But you already know how to do fit to CSV. Fit to CSV will work the same way. So fit to CSV will handle your UKF output, it will handle your KF track output, and it will handle Trackit output too. So you don't really need this chunk unless you like what they're saying. But it's basically, they just took some line from my fit to CSV to put it there essentially. So that's the chunk for output stuff. You don't really need these things, but the most important part is for this script is they allow you to at least fill in some of the information for you quicker. So that's the most important part of these files.
But that script is to get that file or to run after?
To run.
After that file.
So you already have the LL file, right? So it's already generated. So it's just like a script that you want to run it in now.
Okay.
So this is an out script. So yeah, so this is how you get it. And yeah. You can do the same for your WC file, which you already, you have the workspace, I already have the workspace. But you can try the same for your for Cindy. It's the same way. You drag and drop your WCH file into that, let it run through, and you have the same option. And I'll just reiterate a bit on here. So that's the other option to. That's the other option to output the SST file too. So the tracking interface, I want this to show up now. Come on. But I just have to be patient. But there's the without SST option or with SST option. So the only difference for that two options, it will output you another file for the SST. So not just that one LL file, but it will output a SST file. So you will have two input files. So that's the only difference. So if you do it here, and you pick the other option with SST, it will just output you two files. So that's it.
With the first one being the one without.
Well, the one is the first one is light, yeah. So if you just do the first one without SST, it just has the light file. But if you do it with SST, it will give you the SST file as well. So there are two files. But by SST, we mean it's from the tag. It's not the imagery. It's from what the tag has recorded as SST. And this is covered all in the website. So
Where?
let's see. Party software using. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Let's see. Oh, my bad. I didn't explicitly say like the point out like with SST or without SST. So it's kind of the same interface, but it's just kind of described here. It's not as complete as I want. So you see here is I just mentioned it in words. I don't have a screenshot.
Where do you mention
Yeah, here.
Article.
That's the two lines. But I did say make sure you check the information on the fixed first and last because the same column of 0 and 99. I don't have a screenshot, but
So, can we just before running the Trackit
Mhm.
option to just put the starting and end point?
I think yeah. If you have done that, it should be able to populate the stuff correctly. But they don't ask for it and they don't prompt you to enter it anyway. So you really
You just
don't.
have to remember.
You just have to remember or sub-related. Like if you have 0 and 99, Trackit probably will freak out anyways. Because 99 latitude is outer space. Yes. But yeah, so that's how you get your data if you want to use it. That's probably something, if you have a lot of time, is if you go through the whole process from KF track, then UKF, and then if there's a Wi-Fi tag, feel free to do that. Or even for the first cut, you can just run it without lights and see how it looks. I wouldn't really recommend it for too short a track. If you have like maybe 2-3 weeks, if you are only 2-3 weeks long data, it's likely to give you a very not too good solution, but it's still worth a try. So it might not work too well for really short tracks, but it should still do a pretty good job. And we'll run through exactly how you do it in using examples. Okay. Okay, so if you want to, it's probably self-guided. Now because you're now all masters of using the common filter packages, you probably can step through some examples pretty easily. And so to get to the files, you want to go to again source, to source, then go to trunk, workshop. then materials, you have these three examples. They're not difficult examples, but it'll run through the drifter example, which we can run together. So you can download these three scripts, and there's some familiar friends that you already understood. So you have fit to CSV already there. You know it pretty well by now. There's some data files. You don't really need the data files because we're using just example. Maybe we need the data files. You can call it from package, but you can also just do your read thing. And I think when I wrote those examples, I assume it's using your own file. So I simulate that process by just outputting data sets in the package as a file, so you have to read it back in again. So you see on the example that in the data file is all, these are the data files. So it's a drifter data set. So drifter light is what we was almost trying to do with the Wi-Fi software just now. Then there's the SST file to go with the drifter. So if you do the Trackit with SST option, so these are the two input files you need. Then this drifter actually, when we do it, it was a ground truth truthing exercise. So you actually have GPS positions on it. So that's the GPS tab. So for us to for visualization later, you want to see how well it works. That's why we bring this file in. So there's just some GPS positions on that drifter. Modeling tab is the modeling that I showed you yesterday, just raw data. This is a much bigger file, but the drifter tab, the drifter data set is transmitted light data from a pet tag. So you don't have the continuous light curves, you just have the chunks of positions. I think read that this function was for the older pet tags, which you don't use anymore. So if you have pet 2 to 4, you can use this file to help you read things in. But this is getting old anyway. So these three files, you can download it and you can open it up and run it along, or you can just go ahead and do it all by yourself too.
All three.
Like the main stuff is in 1 and 2. 3 is more just discussion stuff. So. I'll run through the first part with you as soon as I find my files. So as usual, just fire up IR. And just assume that you save it into a directory, but you can put it in any working directory that you. These are simple things. Now you already have to set working directories and dumping the files. So this is more heavily annotated than usual because it's supposed to allow you to run it yourself. But you know how to drive a lot of the things now, so you can just go ahead and copy and paste stuff in. And start off Trackit. We have been doing that for a lot of times yesterday already. Then we want to read in the data set. So this is the part you want to download that tab file because this kind of simulates your own processing. But I'll just be lazy. I'll just call up the data set from within. So I call up drifter. Let me make this bigger so you can see. But you can download the file and start it up like that too. I just call up Drifter because it's the same data set. So we're at that point, so you call Drifter, you do the same head and tail thing, you can see the data file. Make sure, as we have been doing these 2 days, the file has to look correct. So you'll see a nice header. They're off into separate columns. I think we have some hiccups yesterday on some files that it's not read incorrectly. It has a full stop breaking in between, so that's not what we want. To something that looks nice and formatted like that. Let me resize my window a little bit. Okay, then this is the first step. It's called prep it, or basically prepare something. So I'll just tell you again what these things are. So the first function is to call prep it. I make a little bit of mistake here too. PT is actually a function in R, so you don't want to call your stuff with a function name. So I'll just spell a bit that there, or PT1. But that's just for programming stuff. It doesn't really matter if you still use PT, you just overwrite on top of our stuff. But essentially, you're assigning the output from here into PT1. It needs the data drifter, and then you take the first and last positions. First and last positions goes from 0 to 360 again. So these are this is longitude. So longitude, latitude, start date, and then longitude, latitude, and then end date. So that's what you want to have all those columns. And date is 6 days need 6 inputs, so it will be year, month, day, hour, minute, seconds. So that's what these 2 things are. And scan the last part here. So now, so you have your input data, your start point, end point, and then the last bit is called scan. Scan means basically you don't have to scan for the solar event. And you use this option, scan equals to false when you're dealing with transmitted data. If you're not doing transmitted data, it's turned up. This is true by default. The default option is true. And it's used for archival data. Because for archival data, we have to scan through it to find the right solar events. So it takes a procedure to scan through your entire time series, find the part that's most important, and this is the step. But if you're using the drifted data set is a transmitted data set, they have already done that. It has already cut out the parts that is supposed to be important. So that's why we set scan equals to false. So that's the only difference. So if you run that line, and it should just create that object. I'll turn it back to PT because the rest of the script will be referring to PT. So just run it. And then it'll do things like that. It will just go through, write the file, stream in the data, and if you see all these things saying done and found, and then creating internal object doneness, then it's a happy model. It's a happy process. So they're able to generate the input files correctly if you can do that. So essentially, what it does, you look for the right solar event, so sunrise, sunset, from your file, and make sure it's able to cut it out. So. That's the part. So if you ever get stuck here, then you have to let me know, because like it can mean several things. One thing is it's not common anymore, but it used to be if you have to do the file, to format the file by yourself, or even reading in an archival tag, if they're not sorted in correct ascending order of date time. So if your file got mixed up, you have half a sunset light at the end of maybe day 100, but your track is maybe 200 days, but somehow you mix it up and put that part at the end. It's not sorted correctly, this part will fail. So this one needs a sorted data frame. And if you have messages, error messages through them, sometimes because of issues like that, is the input data is not in the correct order. It was trying to go through time to find the events. If things like that happen, you will just throw it up and it will freak out. So you already, now this process basically generates input data for you to run. So you basically, once you do that, you skip ahead and run it. And you just run the model. And that's it. That's the first Trackit model you're running. And the same similar picture you get. I forgot whether this one will converge. I think this one will converge, but we'll see.